The small town of Oak Ridge, Oregon, always seemed perfectly peaceful. Surrounded by towering pine trees and dense, foggy forests, its residents took pride in their quiet lives. But behind the white picket fences of the quiet suburbs, an unsettling darkness grew unnoticed, waiting to tear this perfect community completely apart. For Emily Carter, life in Oak Ridge was simple until the Miller family moved into the large, Victorian house next door. They were quiet, polite, and kept their curtains tightly closed at all hours. However, Emily quickly noticed strange, muffled sounds coming from their dark basement late at night. One rainy Tuesday, Mr. Miller was packing heavy black garbage bags into his trunk under the cover of darkness. When he saw Emily watching from her porch, he froze completely. His cold eyes stared back, sending a terrifying chill straight down her spine that made her instantly regret looking. Determined to brush off her growing paranoia, Emily tried focusing on her work the following afternoon. But the local news suddenly broadcasted a shocking report about a young woman who had mysteriously vanished from a neighboring town just 3 days ago, right around the time the Millers arrived. Suspicion quickly turned into obsession as Emily began watching the house closely, logging every unusual movement. The Millers rarely left during the daytime, but the basement lights constantly flickered in rhythmic patterns. It almost looked like someone inside was desperately trying to signal for help to the outside world. Unable to ignore her gut feeling any longer, Emily decided to call the local police department. Sheriff Thomas arrived shortly after, listening patiently to her frantic theories on her porch. He promised to look into the matter, but his dismissive, tired smile suggested he believed she was just overreacting. Later that evening, the sheriff walked over to the Miller residence to conduct a routine welfare check. Emily watched breathlessly from her dark window as the front door slowly opened. The sheriff stepped inside the house, the door clicked shut behind him, and the entire neighborhood fell completely silent. Hours passed by, but the sheriff never walked back out of that house. His patrol car remained parked on the curb, its empty seats illuminated by the flickering streetlights. Panic gripped Emily's heart as she realized something had gone terribly wrong, and she was now completely on her own. Sleep was impossible as Emily paced around her dark home, watching the silent street. Suddenly, a faint, scratching sound echoed from her own basement walls, which shared an old, forgotten underground connection with the Miller property. Someone or something was slowly moving through the dark crawl space beneath her feet. Armed with only a small flashlight, Emily slowly opened her basement door, the hinges groaning loudly. The damp, cold air rushed up to meet her as she descended the creaking wooden stairs. She knew entering the shadows was dangerous, but the faint, desperate whimpering below forced her forward anyway. Her flashlight beam scanned the dusty concrete walls, revealing old storage boxes and forgotten tools. In the furthest corner, behind an old, heavy wooden wardrobe, she discovered a hidden stone archway. It was a secret tunnel, long abandoned, leading directly toward the foundation of the mysterious Miller house next door. Step by step, Emily crept through the narrow, damp tunnel, the sound of dripping water echoing all around her. The air grew heavier, smelling strongly of rust and old earth. At the end of the corridor stood a heavy iron door, slightly ajar, revealing a brightly lit room ahead, peeking through the crack. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. The basement was transformed into a horrific high-tech laboratory filled with monitors, medical equipment, and large glass vials. But what truly paralyzed her with fear was the missing woman, tied securely to a chair, unconscious but thankfully still alive. Emily looked around frantically for the sheriff, but instead she spotted his uniform jacket discarded carelessly on a nearby metal table covered in dark stains. A sudden realization hit her like a physical blow. The danger was far greater than she imagined, and she needed to escape right now. Before she could turn back toward the tunnel, a heavy, cold hand slammed firmly onto Emily's shoulder from behind. A chilling, familiar voice whispered softly into her ear, welcoming her to the house. She turned slowly to face Mr. Miller, who held a syringe gleaming under the bright lights. Thinking quickly, Emily violently swung her heavy flashlight backward, striking Mr. Miller squarely across the face. He groaned in pain, dropping the syringe as he stumbled backward onto the floor. Seizing her only chance, Emily dashed past him, running deeper into the confusing layout of the basement labyrinth. She scrambled up a flight of concrete stairs, bursting through a door into the main hallway of the Miller house. The interior was completely stripped bare, lacking any furniture or family photos. It wasn't a real home at all. It was a carefully constructed facade designed to hide their dark operations. Heavy, frantic footsteps echoed from the basement stairs behind her, accompanied by Mrs. Miller's voice shouting orders to block the exits. Emily rushed toward the front door, pulling desperately at the heavy brass locks, but they wouldn't budge. She was completely trapped inside the house of horrors. With no other choice, Emily broke a nearby window pane using a heavy ceramic vase, glass shattering loudly across the wooden floor. She hastily scrambled through the jagged frame, tearing her jacket and skin as she tumbled out onto the wet, muddy grass of the front lawn outside. Adrenaline pumping, Emily stood up and ran blindly into the dark, foggy pine forest surrounding the neighborhood. The freezing rain stung her face as she pushed through sharp branches, hearing the distant, angry shouts of her pursuers echoing through the trees behind her, closing the distance rapidly. She collapsed behind a massive fallen log, desperately trying to quiet her heavy, ragged breathing. Through the thick fog, she saw flashlight beams cutting through the dark woods, searching the area. The Millers were hunting her down like prey, determined to silence the only witness to their crimes. As a flashlight beam swept directly over her hiding spot, Emily closed her eyes tightly, preparing for the worst. Suddenly, the loud sound of a distant car horn echoed from the main road, distracting the hunters. The beams shifted away, giving Emily a fleeting, crucial moment to escape. Emily pushed forward, running toward the distant sound until she finally burst out of the tree line onto the empty, wet highway. Ahead, a large semi-truck was slowing down due to the thick weather. She stood directly in the road, waving her arms frantically in the headlights. The truck slammed on its brakes, skidding to a halt just feet away from her. The kind-hearted driver helped a shivering, bleeding Emily into the warm cabin. As he called emergency services, Emily looked back at the dark tree line, knowing the horror was far from over. Within an hour, the quiet street of Oak Ridge was flooded with flashing red and blue lights. Dozens of heavily armed state police officers surrounded the Miller house, tactical gear gleaming in the rain. Emily stood by an ambulance, watching as the authorities prepared to breach the front door. Tactical officers kicked the door open, rushing inside with weapons drawn. But after a thorough search of the entire property, the house was found completely empty. The Millers, along with their high-tech laboratory equipment and the captive woman, had vanished into thin air through another hidden exit. The investigation stretched on for weeks, turning Oak Ridge into a media circus. News vans lined the streets, and reporters constantly questioned Emily. The FBI took over the case, discovering that the Millers was a completely fake identity used by a highly organized, dangerous underground criminal syndicate. During a formal interview at the local field office, FBI agent Harris showed Emily a series of classified photographs. He explained that this syndicate operated across several states, kidnapping specific people for secret medical experiments, always hiding right under the noses of unsuspecting suburban neighborhoods. Agent Harris revealed another shocking detail. Sheriff Thomas hadn't been captured. He was actually on the syndicate's payroll for years, actively helping them cover up their tracks in Oregon. The very person Emily trusted to protect her was working directly with the monsters next door. Unable to feel safe in her own home anymore, Emily packed her bags and decided to leave Oak Ridge permanently. The memories of that terrifying night haunted her every waking moment. She needed a fresh start, far away from dark forests, secret tunnels, and lying neighbors. 2 months later, Emily settled into a small, bright apartment in downtown Seattle. The bustling city noise was a comforting contrast to the eerie silence of Oak Ridge. She secured a new job and finally began to feel like she was taking control of her life again. One evening, while walking home from a nearby grocery store, Emily noticed a familiar black sedan parked across the street. Her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly told herself it was just lingering paranoia. She hurried inside her apartment building, locking the door securely behind her. Later that night, Emily received an anonymous email on her laptop. The message contained no text, only a single attached image file. With trembling fingers, she clicked open the file, and her breath completely stopped. It was a live, high-resolution photograph of her standing on her own balcony. The realization crashed over her instantly. The syndicate had tracked her down to Seattle. They were actively watching her every move from the shadows. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but Emily refused to become a helpless victim again. She immediately dialed Agent Harris's direct federal number. Agent Harris told her to stay inside and stay away from the windows, promising that a local tactical team was already en route to her exact location. Emily moved into the interior hallway, sitting on the floor with her back pressed firmly against the solid bathroom door. Suddenly, the power in her entire apartment building went completely dead, plunging everything into total darkness. The comforting city sounds outside seemed to fade away into an ominous silence. Then, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps slowly approaching her front door, stopping right outside. The doorknob began to turn slowly and deliberately. Emily gripped a heavy metal kitchen knife she had grabbed earlier, her knuckles turning white. The lock clicked open, and the door swung wide, revealing a tall, shadowed figure holding a suppressed pistol silhouetted against the dim hallway lights. Before the figure could step inside, loud shouts of "FBI! Drop your weapon!" echoed through the stairwell. Flashbangs detonated with blinding light and deafening noise, completely disorienting the intruder. Tactical officers swarmed the hallway, tackling the assassin violently to the floor, securing the dangerous area within seconds. The captured assassin was dragged away in handcuffs, his face exposed under the bright police lights. Agent Harris arrived shortly after, reassuring Emily that this specific arrest would finally give the FBI the precise encrypted data they needed to completely dismantle the syndicate's entire nationwide network. Months later, the syndicate was fully destroyed, and Emily finally found true peace. But she knew she would never look at a new neighbor the same way again. Because behind the most perfect, beautiful smiles and ordinary suburban lives, the most terrifying, deadly secrets can remain hidden forever.